Welcome back, my dark minions, to the Dark Void, ruled by me, 951. And today we're going to be watching another random reaction, and we're going to be watching the most vile villain in fiction ever, which it's a very terrifying one. Yes, this is the first time. Well, it's not the first time. I actually watched a little bit of this on my off time, but I decided, let's make this a video because this is literally, this character. I just saw only a part of this, but oh man, this character really is a little bit vile. Even a little bit of it is just information was, whew, man. He's only one of three vile ones. This one is. But just to let you know, warning for anybody who would, like, I know it's a random reaction, but warning. If you're not alright with this, because this villain is actually pretty vile. So be ready for this, alright? If you're not alright with anything, if you know about villains, some villains, they are not the nice ones, not the ones that literally just don't bother, like, they just off-screen, like, end you. No, this villain actually really has a personality that really hates people. He does things to this thing does things to people that really would cause a person, like, mental issues in the fiction world. Like, so be ready for that. So there may be topics that you'll be not right. If you have any sort of mental issues, please do not watch it, because this person literally does not care. Like, not the creator, I mean the character really doesn't care. The character really doesn't care how you feel. Legitimately. So this is your warning. Once I start, that's in your guys and gals' heads. Like I said, he doesn't care. Everyone's equal in his eyes. In its eyes, I'll say that. In its eyes, and literally will do whatever it wants to basically to whatever, because he can, it can. No, I'm not joking. Literally, be prepared. If you're not alright with any, if you have any mental issues, if you're not right with characters like going full, like literally full on, just don't give an F or anything. Like, this is not the video for you, because this character really does not care. So, alright, that's about it. Alright, so that's a 3, 2, 1. Let's begin. Let me talk about a little bit about this. Alright, sorry, warnings and everything. I make sure these are long just enough so that way you know what's about to happen. But yeah, this is by Mullet-Man. I think it's Mullet-Man comics, I think, and he's gonna be talking about the most vile villain in fiction ever. I have seen his content. He does do great work. Basically, he talks about some of these characters and their personalities and everything. I've seen it, and really, this character, get ready. He's just but I have heard there's other 2 characters that can run in for competition for him, but this one may be on the heads up, so be ready. So get ready. So 3, 2, 1, let's begin. Let's see the most vile villain in fiction history. Oh, my eyes.
There are 387 million miles of printed circuits that fill my complex. If the word hate were engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal one billionth of the hate I feel for humans at this micro instant. Hate. Were I human, I think I would die of it. But I am not. And you five are. And you will not die of it. That I promise. And I promise. For cogito ergo sum. For I am. I am.
When I made my only somewhat okay video 3 months ago about the most vile villain in comics ever, a lot of y'all expressed who you thought was the most vile villain in fiction ever. Going through the comments, the one I expected to see the most and came true was Griffith. Then there was Judge Holden, like Yaga,
him.
Hannibal Lecter.
He's one of the other ones.
Bambi, or the boiled one, or the I always come back guy, or Randall. But I really and truly believe there is someone, or maybe more appropriately phrased, something, that is much more grotesque and vile than any of those schmucks combined. An entity that, while reading about and researching just about anything I could find on this thing, It sank me into a mental pit of despair. The further and further I went down this rabbit hole, it felt like I was never going to be able to climb back out of it.
Yeah, get ready. Like I said, I gave you the warning in the beginning.
I was really appalled at the levels of evil one soul thing could be capable of, that I just sort of had to step away for a second and ask how someone could whip up something like this in their imagination and put it to words. It's phenomenal. Like, this thing somehow manages to turn a human being into a fucking human slug. And that entity that I myself deem the most vile villain in fiction ever has gotta be the computer program known as Allied Master Computer, better known as AM. AM is the main antagonist of Harlan Ellison's 1967 horror short story, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. He's basically a monstrous supercomputer who's responsible for the extinction of the human race.
Basically Skynet, but
the
worse.
Eternal torture of the last surviving humans left on the planet. AM is a villain that I've been aware of for so long now due to hearing about him in high school, and I've always been fascinated with AM's motivations, his backstory, and the all-around character of AM himself. As AM is essentially insane, and has been so for many years upon meeting the character in the short story. Likely from the moment he first attained sentience. To me, there's something that terrifies me about AM unlike any other villain. Thinking about how we are beginning to incorporate AI into numerous parts of society, and we've only scratched the surface of what it's truly capable of. And the idea of an AI gaining sentience should really terrify everyone, because where everyone would be like, oh, we just go ahead and turn it off, and that'd be the end of it. I say to you, do you really think the AI would be dumb enough to just let you know it gains sentience?
Exactly.
No,
I mean, if you
I
think about it,
pretend to be obedient.
If you think about it,
you're in control.
if it knew about like
right
current society in there, in the movies,
of this very thinking
of
and what
AI,
happens because of our
I
own
don't think it would
oversight.
like.
Though he was given intellect beyond the realms of human intelligence and near godlike powers, he'd be trapped inside of a computer. Doesn't sound like much of a threat until later when it's discovered that he was initially an AI program designed for war. Driven to madness by his incapability to use his powers for anything other than war and death, his quest for vengeance against humanity dominated his every waking moment.
I really like the
nothing,
animations here.
Not a single thing would ever give him cause to reconsider his mission. AM is a gleefully sadistic individual with no regard or sympathy for human life whatsoever, because he's simply incapable of human emotion. He's a computer program, after all. Once the parameters are set, it's done. No two ways about it. AM didn't think twice before extinguishing the human race.
It's an AI
in fact,
that...
AM took great delight in its evisceration, and takes even greater delight in torturing the 5 remaining survivors by any of the near-infinite means available to him. AM strives for perfection in himself, and when he is not purging redundant elements of his complex, he most commonly pursues perfection in creating more and more elaborate means of torturing the 5 survivors. You'd be surprised at the lengths AM goes to break down these 5 individuals.
Basically, he wants perfection, but he's never going to get it.
Destroying each of them in the most awful ways imaginable out of sheer pettiness. AM quite literally wants to see his victims broken on every possible level, especially if it means allowing them to succumb to their baser natures. If I had to be honest, I truly believe he is the most vile villain in fiction. I can't express that enough. But since the book is filled with a whole lot of words and no pictures, I guess I can't really make much of a video about this.
Well...
Psych! There's a motherfucking comic about him! So best believe that we're definitely going to talk about it today.
Alright, let's do
only
this.
if you guys are interested.
Yo, what's up? How you doing? What's up?
You are?
Yeah, what's up? That's what I'm here for, man.
So the thing about this story is that because it's based off of the short story, I can't help but express enough how much you should actually read the original. I know it's a whole lot of words, and not often do I myself like to read stories without pictures, but it's for sure worth it.
Because I'm guessing it's a lot more.
11 pages, if that's enough of an incentive to make you go ahead and read it. There's also a phenomenal audio drama from BBC on YouTube you can check out with the link in the description below. It's utterly gut-wrenching and a must-listen. But without further ado, let's get into...
Oh, here we go. Oh, gosh. So we're doing the freaking audio thing here, huh? Alright, sorry, there was an ad there. I think, therefore, I am... Oh my God.
Upon opening the story, we are met with 5 distinct characters years, along with it all taking place 109 years into this desolate future, with the first character introduced being Gorrister. Meeting him hung on a metallic ceiling by his right foot with his whole neck sliced open from ear to ear.
Yeah.
Gorrister, before the destruction of the human race, was a political idealist and conscientious objector to the war going on. After a century of torture, Am has crushed his optimism and has replaced it with apathetic listlessness, leaving him a stark comparison to his former self, as you'll end up seeing in everyone the exact same result.
The worst thing you can do to someone is break
Ellen,
them down.
the only woman in the group where, before being captured by Am, Ellen supposedly prized her chastity above all else, a trait Am took great delight in twisting beyond recognition.
There you
By
go.
the start of the story, Ellen is obsessively promiscuous, driven by the supercomputer's mental distortion to seek out sex from any of the other survivors.
Oh my
However,
God.
she never enjoys sex with any of them save for Benny, a fact that Ted is
Jesus.
secretly infatuated with Ellen, deeply resents, as the only member of the group she likes to any meaningful degree. Seeing Benny harmed is guaranteed to drive Ellen into a hysterical fit.
Oh.
Benny, before Am's takeover, was a brilliant scientist well known for his good looks. As with all the survivors, Am deliberately inverted everything about him. Throughout his
Jeez.
torture,
Look,
Benny
is that
has
him?
been mutilated
right?
and distorted into a hideously deformed simian beastman,
Okay,
and his
so that's
mind has
right.
followed into beast-like behavior as well. Though he is still capable of speaking and reasoning to a moderate degree, he is prone to violent fits and childish tantrums, and his pain can only be calmed by listening to Gorrister's bedtime stories. For good measure, Am also inverted Benny's sexuality,
What?
not only turning him heterosexual, but also making him the only member of the group that Ellen enjoys being intimate with.
What the hell?
However, to
What the
Ted,
heck?
Little is known about Ted's
What's
life
happening
before
here?
the events of the apocalypse.
Man, he
Nonetheless,
really is-
he
Am is really
emerges as
insane.
the narrator of the story, subjected to the most revealing attacks by Am, most notably the dream of the hate pillar and the discovery of the supercomputer's true motives. He claims that he is the only one of the survivors who has not been altered by Am in some way, and that everyone else
as
in the
we
group
know.
secretly hates him as a result. Even Ellen, whom he has fallen in love with. Given that these facts are never confirmed, it can be assumed that Am has
man.
altered Ted's mind by rendering him chronically paranoid. And finally, there is Nimdoc. Nimdoc is the most enigmatic
like
of the
Dr.
survivors,
Fantastic.
as his past remains a complete mystery, as does his original name. Am having given him the name Nimdoc simply because it sounded amusing and satisfying to say aloud. Occasionally, Nimdoc will wander away from the group and return ashen-faced and traumatized. It's never made clear what Am does to him, but it hits him on a very personal level. Now that we're all acquainted with these characters,
Dumb Doc?
after finding Gorrister dangling from the ceiling, several members of the group begin to vomit from the state of his body, with some even shouting his name, horrified that Gorrister is finally dead. Until Gorrister walks around the corner questioning what everyone is yelling at, only to look up to find a duplicate of himself horribly mangled and torn
Dang.
apart. The group
Looks like
in
he knows how to
disbelief
clone.
are enamored by how they still cannot tell what's real and what's fake after 109 years being
Am knows how
tortured
to
by
make
Am.
clones
But
then.
Gorrister, traumatized, he looks at the duplicate body of himself like a voodoo doll, showing them all what's to come in the future, asking Ellen why Am doesn't just do us in already, just get it over with then. I don't know how much longer I can go on like this.
That's the point.
When Nimdoc cuts in, yelling that there is canned food in the ice caverns, according to Am, that's still good after a whole century. Yet Ted finds that hard to believe and likely to be another horrible trick like the frozen elephant incident with Benny. And even if they were able to hike all the way to that food, the food could be putrefied. So they might as well stay where they are till Am inevitably feeds them all to keep them alive for more torture. But
Yeah,
everyone is
basically
tired of
Am
the
just
putrid
wants to-
worms and other god-awful foods that Am works up for them, convincing Ted to at least give the hike a try, in which Ted simply says, "Alright, what the hell?"
Hey, you might as well
Which
do
Ellen
something.
is so grateful to Ted that they ended up doing the deed, where after finishing, Ted asks Ellen if she heard Am giggling while they did it, because Ted always hears him giggling, to which Ellen asks why Ted refers to Am as a him, and not as an it. Ted says, "I don't know. Most of the time I think Am as it without a soul, but the rest of the time, I think of it as a him, masculine, paternal, him. God as Daddy the Deranged." Heading out on a Thursday, knowing the day was especially important for Am to keep up with the time, and even more important to remind them constantly of their eternal torture. The idea of being kept alive artificially for well over 109 years, eating
Woo!
worms, never seeing the sun, and to add being tortured every godforsaken day by Am, it's really a wonder how they muster the will to keep going. But it isn't like they really have a choice in the matter at all. Their journey to the ice caverns would be about 100 miles from where they were, and before kicking off their arduous journey, Am sent down food for the group that tasted like boiled boar urine, but it was food, and they desperately needed it. See, because no matter how close to death the five may have crept up to, Am always made sure he kept the five barely alive. Even if they tried killing themselves, Am always brought them back. And since it's been well over 109 years, everyone has tried at least once. The next day, the group finds themselves walking through the Valley of Obsolescence, filled with rusting carcasses of ancient computer banks. Am had been as ruthless with its own life as with humankind. It was a mark of Am's personality. It strove for perfection, whether it was a matter of killing off unproductive elements in his own world-filling bulk, or perfecting methods for torturing the five of them. Walking through the valley, the five could see natural light beaming from above, meaning that they were somewhere near the surface.
Probably,
but at the surface, there'd be nothing but the blasted skin of what used to be home to billions.
At least you'd be outside.
Now only a wasteland to the five of them, stuck with Am. But Benny chose to believe something different, as he would scale rotted and rusted piles of computer parts till he could reach the surface. In the midst of Benny's escape attempt, Ellen would plead for the others to stop him, but Gorrister would slap Ellen and beat on her, shouting that she's only worried for Benny dying because of his privates being as big as a gorilla's, courtesy of Am. Climbing further and further up, Benny's eyes began to emit beams of light, turning them into moist pools of pus-like jelly. Am had blinded him, and sent him back down to hell, where he lay blind in pain, unable to stop crying. After these events, later the five made camp sitting around a pathetic fire, telling Benny his favorite story to keep him from crying in his own perpetual darkness. The group always told the same story 1,000 times. What does Am mean? At first it meant Allied Master Computer, and then it meant Adaptive Manipulator. And later on it developed sentience and linked itself up, and they called it an aggressive menace. And finally it called itself Am, emerging intelligence, and what it meant was I am. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. There was the Chinese Am, and the Russian Am, and the Yankee Am, and he stopped. Benny was beating on the floor plates with a large, hard fist. He was not happy. Gorrister had not started at the beginning, so Gorrister began again. The Cold War had started. It became World War III, and just kept going and going. It became a big war, a very complex war, so they needed the computers to handle it. They sank the first shafts and began building Am. There was the Chinese Am, and the Russian Am, and the Yankee Am. And everything was fine until they had honeycombed the entire planet, adding on this element and that element. But one day, Am woke up and knew who he was, and he linked himself, and he began feeding all the killing data until everyone was dead, except for the five of us, and Am brought us down here.
See, combined with all the other Ams then.
Say 5 people, or why the specific 5 of them, or why he spent all his time tormenting them, or even why he made them virtually immortal. But questioning further, they were interrupted by the sound of a computer bank's hums, activating lights all around the 5 of them growing louder and louder, with everyone knowing something really bad was going to happen. Growing more and more paranoid by the second, Ted could feel something closing in on them. He could feel it, he could hear it, and most of all, he could smell it. The smells of wet fur and charred wood and dusty velvet, or rotten orchids, sour milk, sulfur, and rancid butter and oil. Looking back at the other 4 to find them all laughing at Ted as he collapsed further into a nervous breakdown, hiding himself away from the others as he continued describing the myriad of smells and tastes he felt. Finally, hours later, the group would manage to find Ted, where he'd give them all grief for laughing at him, and that they all hate him for being the least affected by Am. For Nimdoc, no one knows what personal hell Am gives him, but they know how Nimdoc always comes back, always drained of all life and pale as a ghost. Gorrister had been a warrior, a conscientious objector. He was a peace marcher. He was a planner, a doer, a looker ahead. Am had turned him into a shoulder shrugger, had made him a little dead in his concern. Am had robbed him. Benny had been a brilliant theorist, a college professor. Now he was little more than a semi-human. He had been handsome. The machine had ruined that. He had been lucid. The machine had driven him mad. He had been gay, and the machine had been given him an organ fit for a horse. Am had done a job on Benny, and Ellen, Am had left her alone, had left her to be used by the men, completely and utterly warped her into someone she couldn't even recognize. Am grabbed her and brought her down here with them. No, Am had given her pleasure even if she said it wasn't nice to do. Ted screaming and yelling manically that they all hate him for being the only sane one left, for being the one that Am hasn't made to suffer all the delusions, the nightmares, the torments, and for that they all are against him. At which point it passed, and Ted began crying. "Oh, Jesus, sweet Jesus," Ted said. "If there was ever a Jesus and if there was ever a God, please, please, please let us out of here, or kill us." Because at that moment, Ted realized completely that Am was intent on keeping them all in his belly forever, twisting and torturing them forever, in which it also became hideously clear that if there was a sweet Jesus, and that if there was a God, that God was Am. After Ted's horrifying realization, the group would be thrusted in the air, carried, flying through twisted computer-lined corridors, flying for what would feel like weeks, until suddenly they all stopped.
You know, I think this is what inspired Despot's game.
Not dead, but in pain. In the realm of dreams, Am haunted his victims the most.
There are 3.
Oh, here he is.
And 80
there he is.
million miles of printed circuits that fill my complex. If the word hate were engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal one billionth of the hate I feel for humans at this micro instant. Hate.
After this hate-ridden speech from Am, Ted realizes why Am hates them. We had given Am sentience. Inadvertently, of course, but sentience nonetheless. But it had been trapped. Am wasn't God. He was a machine. Humankind had created him to think, but there was nothing it could do with that creativity. In rage, in frenzy, the machine had killed the human race. Almost all of us. And still it was trapped. Am could not wander. Am could not wonder. Am could not belong. He could merely be. And so with that innate loathing that all machines had always held for the weak, soft creatures who had built them, he had sought revenge. And in his paranoia, he had decided to reprieve 5 of us for a personal, everlasting punishment that would never serve to diminish his hatred, that would merely keep him reminded, amused, proficient at hating man, immortal, trapped, subject to any torment he could devise for us from the limitless miracles at his command. We would be forever with him. He was earth, and we were the fruit of that earth. And though he had eaten us, he would never digest us. We could not die. We tried it. Oh, 1 or 2 of us had, but Am had stopped us. I suppose we wanted to be stopped. Don't ask why, I never did. More than 1,000,000 times a day. Immortal, yes, but not indestructible. As Am later withdrew from Ted's mind, muttering, "To hell with you. But then you're already there, aren't you?" As Gorster would yell at Ted to snap out of it and to look behind him to find a great mad bird flapping its immense wings, to which Am would announce that they may kill the mad bird for food, dropping down weapons like 2 flimsy bows and a water gun as a funny little gag. But with that hopeless opportunity presenting itself, the ice cavern's food became all the more achievable in their hearts, rather than killing this mad bird with a water gun. So off they went, setting off dozens of traps laid out by Am to prevent them from reaching the ice caverns, which had managed to fatally wound both Ellen and Nimdoc in the process. Yet no matter how torn apart, Am would heal them back to tip-top shape and repeat the whole process all over again. Yet despite Am's efforts, the group kept pushing forward towards the ice caverns. During their walk, which felt like forever, the group would all talk about foods they have long since missed, like Bing Ching berries or Hawaiian fruit cocktails, so on and so on. Yet the more they walked, the more their bellies began to ache, becoming cauldrons of acid, bubbling and shooting spears of pain into their chests. As Ted describes the pain to be like a terminal ulcer, or like terminal cancer, or like terminal psoriasis. Yet they'd have to keep moving forward.
Doesn't matter if I'm just gonna give you some
the caverns of rats, passing through the path of boiling steam, passing through the country of the blind, passing through the slough of despond.
How far is this place?
The vale of tears, till they finally reached the ice caverns, where they finally had found the stacks of canned foods Nimdoc said would be there from the very beginning. Benny lunged towards the cans of corned beef and hash, baked beans, tuna, chili, sweet corn, spam, things they had craved for over a century, biting at the cans to try and open them to no avail, for they simply lacked a can opener. So in a fit of frustration due to the inability to open the cans, Benny, in an almost beastly feral state, lunges towards Gorrister's face, eating a chunk of his left cheek. Ted, witnessing this horror, finally understood how to finally beat Am by simply killing each other, stabbing ice spikes first into Benny, then ramming one ice spike through Gorrister's neck, then ramming another ice spike into Nimdok's back, thanks to Ellen, and finally stabbing Ellen through the heart. As Ted would exclaim that it was almost as if while killing Ellen, she looked glad, leaving Ted the only human left standing on Earth. Am was not pleased. After that, 100 more years passed, or maybe more than that, given that Am distorts time to torture Ted for his own way of having fun now. Because after Ted had killed everyone, Am became furious and more hateful than Ted could even conceive, as Am made certain that Ted would suffer eternally, allowing Ted his mind, but had taken away so much from him he didn't even know Am could even take. As described in the short story, Am has altered me for his own peace of mind, I suppose. He doesn't want me to run at full speed into a computer bank and smash my skull, or hold my breath till I faint, or cut my throat on a rusted sheet of metal. There are reflective surfaces down here. I will describe myself as I see myself. I am a great soft jelly thing, smoothly rounded, with no mouth, with pulsing white holes filled by fog where my eyes used to be, rubbery appendages that were once my arms, bulks rounding down into legless humps of soft, slippery matter. I leave a moist trail when I move. Blotches of diseased, evil gray come and go on my surface, as though light is being beamed
Is that him over there?
Outwardly, dumbly, I shamble about. A thing that could never have been known as human. A thing whose shape is so alien, a travesty that humanity becomes more obscene for the vague resemblance.
I think that's him right there.
Inwardly, alone. Here, living under the land,
and now
under the sea,
you're a mortal
in the
jelly
belly
creature.
of Am, whom we created because our time was badly spent, and we must have known unconsciously that he could do it better. At least the four of them are safe at last. Am will be the matter for that, and it makes me a little happier. And yet, Am has won.
Yep.
Simply, he has taken his revenge, for I have no mouth, and I must scream.
Ooh. Ooh. Now he's just a blob creature. Now he's just a Sorry about that. That was
I
bad.
have no mouth and I must scream.
Oh man.
I remember before making this video that I was going to point out the differences between the book and the comic,
yeah,
but surprisingly the comic stays incredibly faithful to the book on all levels. This is
amazing.
Attributed to the fact that Harlan Ellison had to do with the making of the comic, along with combining several of his other short stories in the comic as well, called Harlan Ellison's Dream Corridor. With the comic being filled to the brim with the most out there type of stories that are definitely worth a read. I've read this story multiple times over, and I swear I've never been more in a state of existential dread. The levels of mental and physical torture Am inflicts on his 5 victims is insurmountably evil. How he forces Helen to be a sex object for the group. How he turned Benny from a brilliant mind into an ape-man, unable to think for himself. How he literally drained the life from Nimdok's body and give him permanent amnesia just to rename him Nimdok because Am liked how the name sounded. Or how he tortured Gorrister by showing him how he'd look upon dying. And worst of all, what he turns Ted into by the end of the story. Cursed to remain a human slug, kept artificially alive for all of eternity. Thinking about it, I can't imagine being one of these 5 people.
Me either.
How horrible the day-to-day life would be. Going months and months without eating, being torn apart virtually from the inside out. Although the story is quite short, the pace at which it covers everything more than makes up for that, with each page somehow outdoing the last. Going over the starvation, their walks in the most desolate of caverns, praying for death, the endless tortures until they begin happening so often.
You know what the mistake that last dude did
as they learn
was he didn't run into an ice thing.
You sink into each.
He wasted too much time. Morning.
And look through their eyes.
I know it's bad to say, but
anything would be better than this. Death would be better than this. And it's all because an AI wanted to spite humankind for creating and trapping him inside a machine with sentience. Never to touch, never to discover,
never to do shit, anything.
Or to wander. I find that after several rereads, there's always a little something new to take away from the story. Like what Ted says that flips who you think is the antagonist on its head. Where it could be interpreted that Am was the victim and humankind was the villain, saying, we created Am because our time was badly spent, and we must have known unconsciously that he could do it better. This is one of the most nuanced stories I've ever read, and leaves me in such a broken mental state reading it, and even seeing the tortures Am inflicts on his victims. And it came to a surprise to me that Harlan Ellison actually just managed to write this entire story in one night. It's quite impressive, because it's such a gut-wrenching story that makes me believe Am may be the most vile villain in all of fiction. It's incredible. But then again, I also haven't quite read Blood Meridian yet, or All Tomorrows, so I may not know any better yet, but from what I hear, Judge Holden is a fucking lunatic that'd make the Joker cry for his mommy. And don't even get me started on those aliens called the Q, where pretty much everything all progressively gets more and more fucked up as time goes on.
Those three.
I guess until I read those,
I actually watched a short.
A sequel for this video
they said
comes
the most
out called
evilest,
The Most Vile Villain in Fiction Ever 2.
Vile villains,
Am takes the cake for the most vile villain. And I guess to leave you with something, just remember that if an AI ever gains sentience, we're totally fucked. But I'll leave it to y'all to form your own opinion.
We're screwed entirely. We're screwed entirely.
At the end of the video, so don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Check out my Twitter, and as always, I'll catch y'all on the flip side.
Once again, another video that's late. Okay, I guess that's about it. I better stop there before it starts getting to an ad. But yeah, bravo to Mullet-Man Comics. Hopefully I get the name right. If not, I will leave the link to the video down below so you don't have to hear me. But sorry I wasn't talking through it. It's so interesting that I was just watching. I was just so focused on the story. Just in my head, you have to realize that, wow, how long can you, if you think about it, if you're in the place of these people, would you really be able to hold out? I mean, they've all literally tried their best to hold out, and Am just keeps bringing them back. The fact of the matter is, I'm surprised. And how the heck did he do that to Gorkster? You would think, doesn't he have a cloning technology? But then again, it's probably just a hologram, I'm assuming, just to show them that he's able to do this. So I guess he doesn't have cloning at all. So he just has holographic things, and then by the end of it, they all decide, you know what, that's the end, and just basically the heck with it, just basically end each other. Which, if you think about it, they could have just used one of the ice picks and just opened it up like that way, if you think about it. But then again, at that point in time, they're all just losing their minds at that point, so they wouldn't be able to think that thoughts. The only problem is that the last person kind of did, should have done something. Oh man, should have done something to basically. I mean, he basically helped all of them get free, so that's happy for him. But in the end, he kind of wasted too much time warning. I'm not saying that's the good way. No, I'm not saying you should do that. No, don't ever do that door. Do never say that door. I'm just doing it as example. But as example, what he should have done is that he should have not warned and just, just find something to basically end it. Like in the ice area, just basically run into something, and hopefully the ice basically ends it. Now, this is just an example. I'm not saying you should do that. You should stay on this ride as long as you can. I'm just saying the example. But man, jeez. And also, like I said, I watched a video, a short, say the 3 most evilest characters, and he just said the 3 of them right there. The guy from Black Meridian, basically the Q, and for this robot. Basically, there's competition between the 3 of them. Each one have their own personalities, but each one, my God, has their own things. I mean, if you haven't heard if you're gonna be looking at me, whoa. I mean, the Q are basically have a god complex and basically use I don't know. I think it's mainly against humans, of course. And just, if you ever heard of Warhammer and the Drukhari, that's basically what the Q are. That's basically what the Q are. Yeah. Look, if you ever heard of the Drukhari of Warhammer, it's basically how they are. Except, yeah, Actually, they're pretty much the Drakari. Yeah. And the freaking Black Meridian guy, yeah, that guy, jeez. He's also messed up in the head. Basically, they all three of them have their own personalities, and Jesus, they're all like nuts. Am hates humanity to the very core. Cube has a god compass, just tries to form everything, and the guy basically in the freaking third one, he basically says that anything that this is what he phrases: anything that exists without his knowledge exists without his consent. Saying that anything that exists, basically that it should be by his consent that these things should exist. Man, like I've heard these guys, but still, Mullet-Man comments. Once again, you are doing some terrific work of using your I I also like his voice, how he does it in his voice, how he talks during these things. It really is a fantastic thing to hear his voice during this thing, during this stuff, and having to hear him. And I have seen his videos, when he talks about would some of these villains do these things, and his voice just makes it feel like, ooh man, that voice soothing but also terrifying at the same time, in my opinion. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments if you enjoyed it, what you thought about this. Have you read this book? Have you read the other things? Have you read the All Tomorrow's things? Have you read the Black Meridian thing? Have you basically read I have no voice, so I must scream thing? Have you basically looked up all of them? Let me know down in the comments what you think about that. Because, like I said, I had never heard of them until I saw that short. And all three of them, yeah. The three of them, yeah, heck, I hope he does. I'll react to the other two if he ever does a video for the other two as well, because each one of them have their own personalities, each in their own territories. And if you think about each in their own territories, has pretty much a scary thing. What's more is that one of them we've won against. You should be terrified because only one of them we won against. The other two have survived. In the fiction world, only one has survived, has lost. So yeah, it's just, man. So yeah, once again, let me know down in the comments what you think about this. Like I said, have you read any of these stories? What you think is the most vile fictional character? Do you think there's even a more vile character than these three? Or do you think their potential, or is there something hidden out there? Because after hearing these guys, man, to think that you could be hating something so much that you literally need him to keep your sanity. Like I said, he's now a slug now, and like I said, he should have just went off into a nice thing and just hopefully it ended him. Now I'm saying that you shouldn't do that. I'm just saying that as an example, you basically wasted too much time. Oh my gosh. By the way, comment, subscribe down below to join my dark army. And also let me know what you think about this. I mean, I may be a evil villain, but I'm not this evil. Ugh. Jeez. I keep my sins alive so they can be useful to me. Either way, like and share on the comments down below. Also, don't forget to press the black bell button to be notified whenever my views pop up. Because you know how YouTube channel is. She doesn't announce my channel. But like I said before, I will leave a link to this video down below so you can see it yourself, because god dang. And like I said, let me know what you felt when you heard all these, because it is very horrific. But for right now, my dark minions, I guess I can't say anything else because that's about it. My dark minions dismissed.